The human ship Terra's voice moved slowly through the dark space around Kethra Prime. Inside the ship, Ambassador Jake Morrison sat at his desk reading reports about the planet below. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. His hands showed the marks of many years of work, but his voice was always calm and gentle. Morrison had been a diplomat for 15 years. He had visited many worlds and met many different alien races. Some meetings went well, others did not. Today would be one of the most important meetings of his career. "Sir, we're getting close to the orbital station," said Captain Paul Richards, over the ship's communication system. "The Cathari are sending their escort ships now?" Morrison stood up and walked to the window. He could see the massive space station floating above the brown and red planet. The station was built like a fortress, with thick metal walls and large weapons pointed in all directions. Around it, dozens of Cathari warships patrolled in formation. "They really don't trust anyone," said Colonel Lisa Bennett as she entered Morrison's office. She was the head of security for the diplomatic mission. Bennett was a tough woman in her 40s who had spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. She always wore her uniform perfectly and kept her weapon ready. "Can you blame them?" Morrison replied. "Their people have been fighting wars for over 1,000 years. They probably think we're here to trick them somehow." Double quotes. Dr. Amy Carter joined them at the window. She was a scientist who studied alien life forms. Carter was younger than the others, maybe 35 years old, with bright eyes that missed nothing. She had spent months learning about Cathari culture and biology. "The Cathari are fascinating," Carter said. "They're about 8 feet tall and have 4 arms. Their skin is like armor, very hard to hurt. They've evolved to be perfect warriors." That's what worries me," Bennett said. "Perfect warriors don't usually want to make peace," Morrison nodded. "That's why we're here. The border fights are getting worse. 3 human colonies have been attacked in the past month. If we can't find a way to work together, this could turn into a full war." The ship shook slightly as the Cathari escort ships moved closer. Through the window, they could see the alien vessels. They looked like giant insects made of metal, with sharp edges and glowing weapons. "Incoming message from the Cathari command," Captain Richards announced. "They want to speak with the ambassador." Morrison walked to the communication console and pressed a button. The screen flickered and showed a Cathari officer. The alien's face was covered by a helmet, but Morrison could see its 4 arms and the glowing lights on its armor. "Human vessel Terra's voice," the Cathari said in a deep, rough voice. "You will follow our ships to Docking Bay 7. You will. Bring only 3 people. Any weapons will be taken from you." "We understand," Morrison replied. "We're here for peaceful talks. We don't want any trouble." The Cathari officer made a sound that might have been laughter. "Peaceful talks, yes. Follow our ships, human." The screen went black. Morrison, Bennett, and Carter looked at each other. "They all knew this would not be easy. I don't like this," Bennett said. "They're treating us like prisoners already." "We expected this," Morrison said. "The Cathari respect strength. They think we're weak because we came here asking for peace instead of bringing warships. Are we weak?" Carter asked quietly. Morrison smiled. "That's what they're going to find out." 2 hours later, the 3 humans walked through the docking bay of the Cathari station. The place was huge, with ceilings that went up so high they couldn't see the top. Cathari soldiers stood everywhere, watching the humans with their glowing eyes. The aliens were even more impressive in person. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with thick bodies covered in natural armor that looked like the shell of a giant insect. Each Cathari had 4 arms, and Morrison could see that each arm was stronger than both of his arms together. "Humans," called a Cathari soldier, "you will come with us now. The Warlord is waiting." They followed the soldier through long corridors filled with weapons and war machines. The walls were covered with pictures of battles and conquests. Everything about the place was designed to show power and strength. "They're trying to intimidate us," Bennett whispered. "It's working," Carter whispered back. Morrison said nothing, but his eyes took in everything. He noticed the guard positions. The weapon types, and the way the Cathari moved. Old habits from his past life were hard to break. They entered a massive throne room. The ceiling was decorated with the bones of defeated enemies. Flags from conquered worlds hung from the walls. At the far end of the room sat a huge throne made of black metal. On the throne sat Warlord Vextar, ruler of the Cathari Empire. He was larger than the other Cathari, with scars covering his armor and ancient weapons hanging from his belt. His eyes glowed red as he watched the humans approach. Standing beside the throne was a younger Cathari, almost as large as the Warlord, but with brighter armor. This was Prince Zarketh, the Warlord's son and heir to the Empire. "So," Prince Zarketh said in a loud voice that echoed through the room, "these are the famous humans we've heard so much about." The prince walked down from the throne area and circled around the three humans like a predator studying its prey. Other Cathari in the room watched and waited. "Look at them, father," Prince Zarketh continued. "They're so small, so weak. This one," he pointed at Morrison, "looks like he might blow away in a strong wind." Some of the Cathari soldiers laughed. Morrison kept his face calm, but Bennett's hand moved toward her weapon. "And look at this one," the prince said, pointing at Carter. "She's trembling. Are all human females this frightened?" Carter wasn't actually trembling, but she was nervous. She had never been insulted by an 8-foot-tall alien prince before. "Your Highness," Morrison said in his calm diplomatic voice, "we've come here to discuss peace between our peoples. Perhaps we could begin the formal talks?" Prince Zarketh laughed again. "Peace? You think you can come here and demand peace from us? You think we're afraid of your tiny ships and your weak soldiers?" "We're not demanding anything," Morrison replied. "We're offering to work together. Both our peoples could benefit from cooperation instead of conflict." The prince moved closer to Morrison until he was looking down at the human ambassador. "Cooperation? What could we possibly gain from working with creatures like you? You're soft, you're weak, you probably can't even fight." Morrison looked up at the prince without fear. "Fighting isn't always the answer, Your Highness. Sometimes the strongest choice is to find another way. Sometimes the strongest choice?" Prince Zarketh repeated, "Listen to this, everyone. The human thinks choosing not to fight is strong." The room filled with laughter from the Cathari soldiers. Warlord Vextar had been silent during this exchange, but now he spoke. "My son raises an interesting point, Ambassador Morrison. Why should we make peace with a species that appears to be so much weaker than us? What's to stop us from simply taking what we want from your colonies?" Morrison met the Warlord's gaze. "Because, Your Majesty, appearances can be deceiving? And because some mistakes are harder to fix than others?" The room grew quiet. Prince Zarketh's eyes narrowed as he studied the human diplomat more carefully. Something in Morrison's tone suggested that there was more to this conversation than simple diplomacy, but the prince was young and proud. He couldn't resist making one more insult. "Mistakes?" Prince Zarketh said. "The only mistake here is that we're wasting time talking to weaklings instead of taking what we want by force." Morrison nodded slowly. "Perhaps we should discuss this further, Your Highness. I'd be happy to show you exactly what humans are capable of." The next morning, the formal peace talks began in the War Council chamber. The room was smaller than the throne room, but still impressive. A long table made of black stone sat in the center, surrounded by chairs built for the large Cathari batas. The humans had to sit on cushions to reach the table properly. Ambassador Morrison opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. He had spent weeks preparing these peace proposals. Each page contained careful plans for trade agreements, border security, and shared defense against common enemies. "Your Majesty, Your Highness," Morrison began, "we believe both our peoples can benefit from working together." These documents outlined several areas where cooperation could help everyone. Prince Zarketh leaned back in his chair and crossed all four of his arms. "More talking," he said loudly. "Always more talking with humans. Don't you ever get tired of making speeches?" Morrison ignored the interruption and continued. "For example, human colonies in the Outer Rim have been attacked by pirate fleets. Your military forces could help protect these areas in exchange for access to our mining facilities. Why would we help protect your colonies? Prince Zarketh asked. If they're too weak to protect themselves, maybe they don't deserve to survive. Colonel Bennett shifted in her chair. Dr. Carter looked uncomfortable. Morrison kept his voice calm and professional. Because, Your Highness, those colonies produce rare minerals that your people need for your ship engines. It would be easier to trade for them than to fight for them. Prince Zarketh laughed. Fight for them? There would be no fighting. We would simply take what we want. Your colonists would run away like frightened animals. That's not what happened at New Texas Colony. Morrison said quietly. The prince's laughter stopped. New Texas was one of the human colonies that had been attacked recently. The Cathari forces had expected an easy victory, but the human defenders had fought much harder than expected. That was a lucky day for your people, Prince Zarketh said. Our scouts report that most of the colonists were farmers and miners. Not real soldiers. Those farmers and miners held off 3 battalions of your elite troops for 6 days, Morrison replied. They only retreated when their ammunition ran out. Prince Zarketh stood up quickly, his chair scraping against the floor. Are you trying to threaten us, human? Are you saying your farmers are better fighters than our warriors? I'm saying that humans fight harder when they're protecting something they care about, Morrison answered. Just like the Cathari do. Don't compare us to your soft species, the prince snapped. We are warriors born and bred. You are shopkeepers and farmers playing at war, Warlord Vextar raised one of his hands. My son, please sit down. Let the ambassador finish his presentation. Prince Zarketh sat down, but he continued to glare at Morrison. The ambassador pulled out another document and placed it on the table. This is a proposed defensive alliance, Morrison said. If either of our peoples is attacked by outside forces, the other would provide military assistance. You want us to help defend you? Prince Zarketh asked. What could you possibly do to help defend us? Your ships are smaller than ours. Your soldiers are weaker than ours. Our soldiers have different strengths, Morrison replied. We're good at working together, at solving problems, at finding new ways to fight. New ways to run away, you mean, the prince said. Several Cathari officers in the room chuckled. Morrison continued as if he hadn't heard the insult. For example, at the Battle of Proxima Station, human forces defeated a fleet twice their size by using new tactics and better coordination. I heard about that battle, Prince Zarketh said. You hid behind asteroids and used tricks instead of fighting with honor. We used our intelligence to win instead of just charging forward, Morrison said. Sometimes the smart choice is better than the brave choice. Prince Zarketh slammed one of his fists on the table. There is no honor in hiding and using tricks. A true warrior faces his enemy directly. A true warrior finds the best way to protect his people, Morrison replied. Sometimes that means fighting, sometimes it means finding another way. Another way, the prince repeated mockingly. You humans always want another way. You're too weak to fight, so you make excuses about honor and intelligence. The room grew quiet. Even the Cathari officers seemed uncomfortable with how rude the prince was being, but Prince Zarketh was not finished. Look at you, he said, standing up again and walking around the table toward Morrison. You sit there with your gray hair and your soft hands, talking about fighting and war. Have you ever actually fought anyone, Ambassador? Have you ever held a weapon in battle? Morrison looked up at the prince calmly. I've fought when I had to, Your Highness. When you had to? Prince Zarketh laughed. What does that mean? Did someone force you to fight? Did you cry while you did it? Colonel Bennett started to stand up, but Morrison gestured for her to stay seated. Dr. Carter was gripping her chair tightly. It means I fought when fighting was the only option left, Morrison said. When talking and negotiating and finding other ways had all failed. And how many enemies did you defeat, old man? The prince asked. 1? 2? Did you run away after the first one? Morrison was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was still calm, but there was something different about it. Something harder. I defeated everyone who tried to hurt the people I was protecting, he said. Prince Zarketh laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Everyone? Listen to this boast, father. The old human says he defeated everyone. The prince walked back to his side of the table and picked up one of Morrison's documents. He held it up and tore it in half. These papers are worthless, he said. Your proposals are worthless. Your entire species is worthless. He tore up another document and threw the pieces at Morrison. You want to know what I think of your peace treaty? This is what I think of it. Morrison watched the paper pieces fall to the floor. His face showed no emotion, but Colonel Bennett and Dr. Carter could. See his hands tighten slightly? Your Highness, Morrison said quietly, I understand that you don't agree with our proposals. But there's no need to be disrespectful. Disrespectful? Prince Zarketh roared. You come to our world, you sit at our table, you waste our time with your weakness, and you talk to me about respect? The prince leaned across the table until his face was close to Morrison's. You want respect, human? Then earn it. Prove that you're not just another weak creature pretending to be strong. How? Would you like me to prove that? Morrison asked. Prince Zarketh straightened up and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. By accepting my challenge to personal combat, one-on-one. No weapons except what we choose to carry. Fight me, and show everyone in this room that humans are more than just soft-skinned cowards. The room became completely silent. Even Warlord Vextar looked surprised by his son's words. Combat? Morrison asked. You want to fight me personally? I want to show everyone here what happens when a real warrior faces a human diplomat, Prince Zarketh said. I want to prove that all your talk about intelligence and tactics means nothing when you're actually in danger. Morrison looked around. The room, every Cathari was watching him, waiting to see what he would do. Colonel Bennett was ready to object, but Morrison held up his hand to stop her. According to Cathari law, Prince Zarketh continued, if you refuse this challenge, it means you admit that humans are too weak to be taken seriously. It means these peace talks are over, and we'll settle our differences the old way. The old way? Morrison asked. War, the prince said simply. Total war, until one of our species surrenders or dies. Morrison stood up slowly. He looked at Prince Zarketh for a long moment, then at Warlord Vextar, then at the other Cathari in the room. Your Highness, he said finally, I accept your challenge. The room erupted in surprised voices. Colonel Bennett jumped to her feet. Dr. Carter gasped. Even some of the Cathari officers looked shocked, but Prince Zarketh just smiled wider. Excellent, he said. Tomorrow at dawn, we'll meet in the combat arena. And tomorrow evening, everyone will know exactly how weak humans really are. Morrison nodded. Tomorrow evening, Your Highness, everyone will know exactly what humans are capable of. After the challenge was accepted, the Cathari began preparing for the combat trial. Dr. Carter was assigned to meet with Prince Zarketh's advisors to discuss the rules of the fight. She walked through the corridors of the station with 2 Cathari guards, her mind racing with worry about Ambassador Morrison. The meeting room was filled with Cathari military officers. They sat around a circular table, their forearms crossed confidently. These were the prince's closest advisors, all experienced warriors who had won many battles. Human female, said General Kexvar, the prince's chief military advisor. We will explain the rules of honorable combat to you. Your ambassador will need to understand them. Dr. Carter nodded and took out a small recording device. I'm listening, General. The combat will take place in our traditional fighting pit, General Kexvar continued. It is a circular arena with stone walls. Both fighters will enter with whatever weapons they choose to carry. The fight continues until one fighter surrenders or cannot continue. Can Ambassador Morrison choose any weapon he wants? Carter asked. Another Cathari officer laughed. He can choose whatever he likes. It will not matter. Prince Zarketh has been training for combat since he was a child. He has defeated over 100 opponents in the arena. I see, Carter said, writing notes on her tablet. And what happens if Ambassador Morrison wins? The Cathari officers looked at each other and laughed again. Your ambassador will not win, General Kexvar said. But if somehow he did, Prince Zarketh would be dishonored. The prince would have to acknowledge that humans are worthy of respect. And if the prince wins? Carter asked. Then the peace talks are over, the general replied. We will know that humans are too weak to be our equals. We will take what we want from your colonies, and you will not be able to stop us. While Dr. Carter was learning about the combat rules, Colonel Bennett was having a different conversation in another part of the station. She had been assigned to meet with the Cathari security forces to discuss safety procedures during the fight. Colonel Bennett walked into the security office and found herself face-to-face with General Morthek, the commander of the station's defenses. He was older than most of the other Cathari, with scars covering his armor and a missing arm from an old battle. Colonel Bennett, General Morthek said, I have heard much about human military forces. Your reputation is ... interesting. Interesting? How? Bennett asked. Your people fight in strange ways, the general said. You use tactics we do not understand. You win battles you should lose. Bennett shrugged. We adapt to the situation. We use whatever works. General Morthek studied her carefully. I have fought against many species in my long career. Most of them fight the way their bodies are built. Strong species fight with strength. Fast species fight with speed. But humans fight with something else. What's that? Bennett asked. Cleverness, the general said, and stubbornness. You refuse to give up even when you should. Bennett smiled. Slightly, that's true. We don't give up easily. Tell me about your ambassador, General Morthek said suddenly. He seems very calm for someone who is about to fight Prince Zarketh. Ambassador Morrison is a remarkable man, Bennett replied. He's been a diplomat for 15 years. He's helped negotiate peace treaties on 12 different worlds. But has he ever fought in combat? The general asked. Prince Zarketh is not just strong, he is also skilled. He has studied every form of combat known to our people. Bennett was quiet for a moment. She looked at the general and seemed to be deciding something. General, can I ask you something? She said finally. Of course. How long have you been a soldier? 43 years. General Morthek replied proudly. I have fought in over 200 battles. That's impressive, Bennett said. Ambassador Morrison was a soldier for 25 years before he became a diplomat. General Morthek's eyes widened slightly. A soldier? Your diplomat was a warrior? Not just any warrior, Bennett continued. He served in the human colonial marines. He fought in the Titan Rebellion, the Europa Station siege, and the Outer Rim conflicts. The general leaned forward in his chair. The Titan Rebellion? I have heard of that war. It was very brutal. It was, Bennett agreed. Morrison was there for 3 years. He led a company of Marines through some of the worst fighting in human history. What did he do after the war? General Morthek asked. Bennett smiled. He received the Terran Cross, the highest military honor in the Human Federation. He earned it for holding off an entire rebel battalion for 3 days while wounded, protecting a civilian evacuation. General Morthek was quiet for a long moment. 3 days by himself? With 2 other Marines, but they were killed on the first day, Bennett said. Morrison held the position alone for the next 2 days until reinforcements arrived. How many rebels did he face? About 400, Bennett replied. He had limited ammunition and no food. He used improvised weapons and booby traps to keep them back. The general's expression had changed completely. He was no longer looking at Bennett as if she were from a weak species. He was looking at her with the respect one warrior gives to another. Why did he leave the military? General Morthek asked. His commanding officers said he was too dangerous for regular military service, Bennett explained. There was an incident with space pirates. Morrison's unit was captured, and he was the only one who escaped. He came back 3 days later. What happened to the pirates? All 47 of them were dead, Bennett said quietly. Morrison had killed them all with improvised weapons and traps. He rescued his unit, but his superiors decided he was too effective at killing people. General Morthek sat back in his chair. So they made him a diplomat? They thought his skills would be better used preventing wars instead of fighting them, Bennett said. Morrison has been working for peace ever since, but he hasn't forgotten how to fight. Meanwhile, back in the meeting room, Dr. Carter was sharing her own information with the Cathari officers. She had been studying their biology and culture for months, and she knew things that might surprise them. General Kexvar, she said, I've been reading about Cathari evolution. Your people developed on a world with lower gravity than Earth. Correct? Yes, the general replied. Our homeworld has about 70% of standard gravity. Why do you ask? I'm just curious about the differences between our species, Carter said. Humans evolved on a high-gravity world. Earth's gravity is about 30% stronger than what your people are used to. What does that matter? Another officer asked. It means humans are naturally stronger than we appear, Carter explained. We've been carrying extra weight our entire lives. When we move in lower gravity, we become much faster and stronger. The officers looked at each other uncertainly. This was not information they had considered. Also, Carter continued, human bone density is much higher than most species. Our muscles are more compact. We're built to survive in harsher conditions. Are you trying to frighten us? General Kexvar asked. Not at all, Carter replied. I'm just explaining why humans might be more resilient than they appear. We've also evolved to be very good at surviving injuries that would kill other species. One of the younger officers spoke up. The ambassador still looks old and weak. Age makes all creatures slower and weaker. That's true for most species, Carter agreed. But humans age differently. We keep our reflexes and experience as we get older. An older human warrior is often more dangerous than a younger one because he has learned from many battles. The room grew quiet as the Cathari officers considered this information. There's one more thing, Carter said. Ambassador Morrison asked me to tell you that he appreciates Prince Zarkath's challenge. He said it's been a long time since he had a chance to fight someone skilled. General Kexvar frowned. He said that? He's looking forward to the fight? He said that fighting Prince Zarkath will be more interesting than fighting pirates or rebels, Carter replied. He said the prince will give him a real challenge. The officers exchanged worried glances. They had expected the human to be afraid. Instead, he seemed eager for the combat. Perhaps, General Kexvar said slowly, we should warn the prince that this human might be more dangerous than he appears. Perhaps, Carter agreed. But I think Prince Zarkath will find out tomorrow. Morning anyway. The morning sun cast long shadows across the combat arena as thousands of Cathari gathered to watch the fight. The arena was a massive circular pit carved into solid rock, with steep walls rising 30 feet on all sides. Stone seats surrounded the pit, and they were filled with excited spectators eager to see their prince defeat the human diplomat. Ambassador Morrison stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena. He had changed out of his diplomatic clothes and now wore simple black pants and a plain gray shirt. In his hand, he held a single combat knife, the standard issue blade carried by human colonial marines. Colonel Bennett paced back and forth in the small room. Jake, you don't have to do this, she said. We can find another way. We can call for backup from the fleet. Morrison checked the edge of his knife and slipped it into a sheath on his belt. Lisa, you know that won't work. If I back down now, they'll never respect us. This is the only way to make them listen. Dr. Carter sat in the corner, her tablet forgotten in her lap. But he's so much bigger than you, and younger. And he has 4 arms. Morrison smiled at her. Amy, I've fought bigger opponents before. Size isn't everything in combat. Sometimes being smaller is an advantage. How? Bennett asked. Smaller targets are harder to hit, Morrison explained, and I use less energy moving around. In a long fight, that matters. A loud horn sounded above them. The arena guards opened the door to the preparation chamber. Human, one of the guards said, it is time. Morrison walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to his friends. Lisa, Amy, whatever happens today, remember that we came here for peace. Don't let my actions start a war. What do you mean? Carter asked, but Morrison was already walking through the door. And up the stone steps toward the arena floor. The crowd's roar was deafening as Morrison emerged into the sunlight. Thousands of Cathari were on their feet, shouting and waving banners. Most of the noise was mocking laughter and insults directed at the human. Morrison walked to the center of the arena and looked around calmly. The pit was about 60 feet across, with a smooth stone floor and walls that curved upward. There were no weapons or obstacles, just empty space. On the opposite side of the arena, another door opened. Prince Zarketh emerged, and the crowd's cheers became even louder. The prince was an impressive sight in his ceremonial combat armor. The armor was made of polished metal that gleamed in the sunlight, and it covered his chest, arms, and legs while leaving his joints free to move. The prince carried 2 curved energy blades, one in each of his upper arms. The blades hummed with power and glowed with blue light. In one of his lower arms he held a small energy shield that flickered with the same blue glow. Prince Zarketh raised his weapons above his head and the crowd cheered louder. He was young, strong, and confident. He had never lost a fight in the arena, and he was certain this would be his easiest victory yet. "Look at him," the prince called out, pointing at Morrison with one of his blades. "Look at the mighty human warrior. He brings only a small knife to fight a prince of the Cathari Empire." The crowd laughed and jeered. Morrison stood quietly in the center of the arena, his hands at his sides, waiting. "Are you ready to surrender now, old man?" Prince Zarketh asked as he walked closer. "You can still save yourself the embarrassment of being defeated." Morrison looked up at the prince. "I'm ready when you are, your highness." The prince laughed. "So brave, so foolish. Let me show you what real combat looks like." A bell rang, signaling the start of the fight. Prince Zarketh immediately charged forward, his energy blades spinning in complex patterns. He moved with the speed and grace of a trained warrior, his 4 arms working together in perfect coordination. Morrison didn't move until the prince was almost on top of him. Then he suddenly stepped to the side, just barely avoiding the prince's first attack. The energy blades passed through the air where Morrison had been standing a moment before. The prince spun around and attacked again, this time bringing both blades down from above. Morrison rolled to the left, came up in a crouch, and drew his knife in one smooth motion. "Stand still and fight like a warrior," the prince shouted. Swinging his blades in wide arcs, Morrison ducked under the swings and moved around the prince's left side. He was staying just out of reach of the energy blades, forcing the prince to keep turning to face him. The crowd was still cheering, but some of the Cathari were beginning to notice that the human was moving very well for someone who was supposed to be weak and old. Prince Zarketh attacked again, this time using all 4 arms in a complex combination. His upper arms swung the energy blades while his lower arms tried to grab Morrison and pull him into range. Morrison avoided the grab by dropping low and rolling between the prince's legs. As he came up behind the prince, he made his first attack, slashing with his knife at the back of the prince's knee. Where the armor was thinner, the knife cut through the armor and drew blood. Prince Zarketh roared in pain and anger, spinning around to face Morrison. "You dare cut me?" the prince snarled. "You dare make me bleed?" Morrison didn't answer. He was already moving again, circling around the prince and forcing him to turn constantly. The prince was bigger and stronger, but he was also heavier and using more energy. For the next several minutes they continued this deadly dance. The prince would attack with his energy blades, and Morrison would dodge or duck or roll away. Sometimes Morrison would get close enough to make a quick cut with his knife, targeting the joints in the prince's armor where the metal was thinner. The crowd was getting quieter. They had expected to see their prince dominate the human quickly, but instead they were watching a long, careful fight where the human seemed to be holding his own. "Why won't you stand and fight?" Prince Zarketh demanded. He was breathing harder now, and sweat was running down his face inside his helmet. "I am fighting," Morrison replied calmly. "I'm just fighting smart instead of angry." The prince roared and charged again, this time abandoning his careful technique and simply trying to overwhelm Morrison with brute force. He swung his blades wildly, Trying to hit the human with any part of his weapons, Morrison saw the change in the prince's fighting style and recognized the mistake. An angry fighter was a careless fighter. He waited for the right moment, then stepped inside the prince's reach and grabbed one of his lower arms. Using the prince's own momentum, Morrison threw him over his shoulder in a classic combat throw. The prince crashed to the ground hard, his energy blades flying out of his hands. The crowd gasped. Their prince was on the ground, and the human was standing over him. But Prince Zarketh was not finished. He rolled away from Morrison and came up with his energy shield in his hands. He activated a hidden feature, and the shield extended into a long energy spear. "No more games," the prince said, breathing heavily. "Time to end this." He thrust the spear at Morrison's chest. Morrison twisted to the side, grabbed the spear shaft, and used it to pull the prince off balance. Then he struck with his knife. Cutting the power cable that fed energy to the weapon, the spear died, becoming just a metal stick. Prince Zarketh stared at it in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "How did you know where to cut?" Morrison smiled. "I've fought with energy weapons before, Your Highness. I know how they work." The prince dropped the dead spear and raised his fists. "Fine, we'll fight with our hands." He charged one more time, his forearms reaching for Morrison. But the human was ready. He stepped forward instead of back, getting inside the prince's reach where the longer arms were less effective. Morrison struck with precision, hitting pressure points he had learned in his military training. The prince's left arms went numb. Then Morrison swept the prince's legs, sending him crashing to the ground again. This time, Morrison was ready. He dropped down and placed his knife at the prince's throat. The arena fell completely silent. The fight was over. "Do you yield, Your Highness?" Morrison asked quietly. Prince Zarketh looked up at the human diplomat who had just defeated him. His eyes were wide with shock and something that might have been respect. "I yield," he whispered. Morrison stood up and offered his hand to help the prince to his feet. After a moment's hesitation, Prince Zarketh took it. The crowd began to cheer. But this time it was different. They were cheering for both fighters, not just their prince. They had witnessed something they had never seen before. A human who could fight like a true warrior. Morrison looked up at the viewing box where Warlord Vextar was sitting. The old warlord was nodding slowly, his eyes showing new respect for the human species. The fight was over, but Morrison knew that the real battle for peace was just beginning. The arena remained silent for several long moments after Prince Zarketh yielded. Thousands of Cathari stared down at the impossible sight of their prince, being helped to his feet by the human diplomat. He had just tried to kill Ambassador Morrison, kept his knife sheathed as he supported the wounded prince. Prince Zarketh was bleeding from several cuts, and his left arms were still numb from Morrison's pressure point strikes. But he was alive, and according to Cathari law, Morrison had earned the right to take his life. "Why?" Prince Zarketh asked quietly, so only Morrison could hear. "Why did you spare me? You won the fight." "You could have killed me," Morrison looked at the young prince with kind eyes. "Because killing you wouldn't bring peace between our peoples, Your Highness. It would only bring more anger and more war." "Prince." Zarketh stared at him in confusion. "But I insulted you. I mocked your species. I called you weak and cowardly." "Yes, you did," Morrison agreed. "But you're young. Young people sometimes say things they don't mean when they're trying to prove how strong they are." The prince's eyes widened. "You're not angry?" Morrison smiled. "I've been called worse things by better people, Your Highness. Words can't hurt me. But your actions today showed me something important about you." "What did they show you?" "That you're brave enough to fight for what you believe in," Morrison said. "That's a good quality in a leader. You just need to learn to choose your battles more carefully." A loud voice boomed across the arena. "Bring them to me." Warlord Vextar was standing in his viewing box, and his voice carried clearly in the silent arena. Morrison and Prince Zarketh walked slowly toward the exit, the prince leaning on Morrison's shoulder for support. They climbed the stone steps to the warlord's viewing box. The box was decorated with the flags of conquered worlds and the weapons of defeated enemies. Warlord Vextar sat in a chair made of black metal, his red eyes studying both fighters carefully. "Ambassador Morrison," the warlord said, his voice deep and respectful. "That was an impressive display of combat skill. Where did you learn to fight like that?" "In the human colonial marines, Your Majesty," Morrison replied. "I served for 25 years before becoming a diplomat." 25 years, the warlord repeated. "And how many battles did you fight in?" "More than I care to remember, Your Majesty," Morrison said. "Too many battles. That's why I became a diplomat. I got tired of fighting." Warlord Vextar leaned forward in his chair. "You got tired of fighting? But you're clearly very good at it." "Being good at something doesn't mean you have to like doing it," Morrison explained. "I'm good at killing people, but I prefer helping them find ways to live together in peace." The warlord was quiet for a moment, considering this. "My son challenged you because he believed humans were weak. He was wrong about that, wasn't he?" "Your son was wrong about many things," Morrison said, "but he was right about one thing. Humans are different from Cathari. We don't glory in battle the way your people do. We fight when we have to, but we prefer to find other solutions. And you think that makes you better than us?" Prince Zarketh asked, his voice still weak from his injuries. Morrison turned to look at the prince. "No, Your Highness, it doesn't make us better or worse. It just makes us different. Both approaches have their place in the galaxy." "What do you mean?" the prince asked. "Sometimes the galaxy needs warriors like the Cathari," Morrison explained. "When evil forces threaten innocent people, someone has to stand up and fight them. Your people are good at that. You're brave and strong and you don't give up. And what are humans good at?" Warlord Vextar asked. "We're good at solving problems," Morrison said. "We're good at finding ways to work together. We're good at building things and fixing things and making life better for everyone." "Both skills are useful," the warlord observed. "Yes," Morrison agreed. "That's why we should be allies instead of enemies. The Cathari can handle the fighting when fighting is necessary. Humans can handle the building when building is necessary." Prince Zarketh looked at Morrison with new understanding. "You're saying we could work together? Our people and your people?" "I'm saying we could accomplish more together than we could apart," Morrison said. "Your people have strength and courage. Our people have technology and creativity. Together, we could build something better than either of us could build alone." Warlord Vextar stood up from his chair and walked to the edge of the viewing box. He looked down at the arena where his son had just learned a hard lesson about judging others by their appearance. "Ambassador Morrison," the warlord said, "I owe you an apology. I allowed my son to insult you and your people. I thought you were weak creatures who could be easily dominated or dismissed." "You weren't entirely wrong, Your Majesty," Morrison sighed. "We are weaker than your people in many ways, but we're stronger in other ways. The question is whether we can find a way to use our different strengths together." "And how do you propose we do that?" the warlord asked. Morrison smiled. "We start by talking instead of fighting. We look for things we have in common instead of focusing on our differences. We try to understand each other instead of making assumptions." "Like the assumption that all humans are cowards?" Prince Zarketh asked quietly. "Or the assumption that all Cathari are mindless brutes who only care about war," Morrison replied. "I've spent the last few days talking to your people. I've learned that you have art and music and poetry. You have families and friends and dreams for the future. You're not so different from us." The warlord walked back to his chair and sat down heavily. "This conversation has given me much to think about, Ambassador. But I have one more question for you." "Yes, Your Majesty?" "Why did you really accept my son's challenge? You could have refused. You could have found another way to handle the situation." Morrison was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because sometimes, Your Majesty, the only way to stop a fight is to prove that you can win it. Your son needed to learn that humans are not easy targets. Your people needed to see that we're not weak creatures who will run away from danger. And now that they've seen that, now we can have real negotiations," Morrison said. "We can talk as equals instead of as predator and prey." Warlord Vextar nodded slowly. You are a wise man, Ambassador Morrison, and a dangerous one. I think my people will benefit from having you as a friend instead of an enemy. That's all I ever wanted, Your Majesty, Morrison said. A chance to be friends. The warlord stood up again and extended one of his 4 hands toward Morrison. Then let us begin these friendship negotiations immediately. I believe we have much to discuss. Morrison shook the warlord's hand, and the crowd in the arena began to cheer again. But this time they were cheering for both the human and the Cathari. 3 days later, Ambassador Morrison sat in the communications room of the Terra's Voice, reviewing the final peace treaty with Colonel Bennett and Dr. Carter. The document was thick with agreements about trade, defense, and cultural exchange. I still can't believe it worked, Bennett said, shaking her head. 3 days ago they were ready to go to war with us. Now they want to be our allies. It almost didn't work, Carter added. If you had lost that fight, Jake, we'd probably be running for our lives right now. Morrison smiled as he signed the treaty. I didn't lose, though. And more importantly, Prince Zarkith learned something valuable. What's that? Bennett asked. That being strong doesn't mean you have to be cruel, Morrison said. And that being peaceful doesn't mean you have to be weak. A communication signal chimed, and Prince Zarkith's face appeared on the screen. The prince was wearing simple clothes instead of his armor, and his arm was in a healing sling. Ambassador Morrison, the prince said, I wanted to thank you before you left. Thank me for what, Your Highness? Morrison asked. For teaching me that true strength comes from knowing when to fight and when to show mercy, the prince replied. I'll remember that lesson for the rest of my life. Morrison nodded. I hope you will, Your Highness. And I hope you'll teach it to others. I will, the prince promised. And Ambassador? I hope we meet again under better circumstances. Sure we will, Morrison said. Take care of yourself, Your Highness. The communication ended, and Morrison turned back to his friends. Well, that's that. Another successful diplomatic mission. Successful? Bennett laughed. Jake, you almost got killed by an 8-foot-tall alien prince, Morrison shrugged. But I didn't get killed. And now we have a new ally instead of a new enemy. I'd call that a success. Dr. Carter looked at the signed treaty. Do you think the peace will last? I think it will, Morrison said. The Cathari respect strength, and they've learned that humans are stronger than they appear. More importantly, they've learned that strength and wisdom can work together. And what did we learn? Bennett asked. Morrison smiled. We learned that sometimes the best way to make peace is to show that you're capable of winning a war. But we also learned that mercy is more powerful than violence. As the Terra's Voice prepared to leave orbit, Morrison looked out at the stars and thought about the future. Humans and Cathari working together, building something better than either could build alone. It was a good beginning, but he also knew that there would be other challenges ahead, other species to meet, other conflicts to resolve. The galaxy was a big place, and there were always